Two young men are spending time at a restaurant together. While they are talking, one of them becomes visibly shocked after hearing something surprising from his friend. The friend reveals that he recently bought an elf to use as a workout slave. The man is taken aback because he never expected his friend to go so far or make such a choice. He cannot believe that his friend would make such a decision, and his reaction draws the attention of nearby customers. When the friend notices that many people in the restaurant are now staring at them, he tells the man to stay calm and take a seat again so that they do not continue attracting attention. The man sits back down but still feels uncomfortable with everything he is hearing. As he tries to understand the situation better, he asks his friend if the elf is really young. The friend explains that when the elf's age is converted into human years, she would be about 25 years old, even though in elf years, she is around 250. Despite the explanation, the man remains uneasy about the idea of someone owning an elf, especially for such a purpose. He tells his friend that if the elf has not yet been brought home, there might still be time to cancel the purchase. However, the friend replies that he already brought the elf to his house 10 days ago, which leaves the man even more surprised and concerned. He then tells his friend that owning an elf is not as simple as it might seem, and he questions whether his friend actually knows much about elves at all. The friend responds by saying he only knows about the elf's physical traits and doesn't believe it is necessary to know more. But after thinking about it for a moment, he decides to listen and asks the man to share what he knows about elves. The man begins by explaining that elves are born with a natural connection to spiritual energy and possess magical abilities from birth. The friend interrupts to say he already knows this part. So, the man continues and begins to explain the more important and dangerous truth. He tells his friend that when elves live calm, quiet lives without stress or destruction, their mana grows stronger over time, and it can reach at least twice the level of an average human's mana. He then points out that if an elf lives for over 100 years, their mana would become so powerful that even the most respected and powerful human archmages would not be able to compare. This information stuns the friend. He never imagined that an elf could hold so much magical power. He becomes alarmed and asks if the man is truly serious. The man calmly assures him that he would never lie about something like this, and based on what he just shared, the elf his friend brought home is likely far more powerful than even the best human archmage. However, the man's friend begins to wonder about something that doesn't make sense to him. He knows that elves usually live deep within the great forest, far away from human civilization. Because of that, he finds it hard to believe that a being as powerful as the man described could be caught by a regular slave hunter. If the elf is truly stronger than a top-ranked human archmage, then there should have been no way for anyone to capture her so easily. Hearing this, the man thinks deeply about it and starts to see his friend's point. It is then that he comes to a new understanding. He considers that maybe the elf was not captured by force at all. Instead, he believes that the elf might have allowed herself to be taken. His friend does not understand what that means, so the man explains further. He says the elf could have grown bored of her long, uneventful life in the forest. After living for hundreds of years with little excitement, she might have wanted to experience something different, something that would give her a sense of challenge or purpose. Becoming a workout slave might have been a strange way for her to break free from the routine and try something new. Still confused, his friend tells him that the elf he bought is marked with a slave seal, a magical symbol that should keep her from rebelling. He believes this mark guarantees her obedience. But the man challenges that assumption. He asks his friend why he thinks the elf allowed the slave seal to be placed on her in the first place. The friend explains that it was the work of black magic warlocks, who specialize in such dark enchantments. But as soon as he says that, he begins to realize something troubling. Even though warlocks are skilled in dark magic, most of them have not lived beyond 100 years. That means their experience and magical power are still limited compared to beings like elves. The man then points out that it would not be difficult at all for a powerful elf, who has lived for over 200 years, to remove a slave seal created by warlocks with far less magical ability. His friend becomes more concerned and asks why the elf would still carry the seal if she has the power to break it. The man answers him plainly. The elf is only pretending. She is keeping the seal on her body because she is playing along, possibly for her own reasons. She might be pretending to be a slave simply to observe, to test, or to entertain herself with the situation. In truth, the man believes that the elf is never truly under control. She is just letting it seem that way. When the man returns home that evening, he begins to notice unusual behavior from the elf that he hadn't paid much attention to before. As she greets him warmly at the door, he decides not to show any reaction. He hides his thoughts and avoids scolding her. However, during dinner he starts feeling uneasy. Her actions, once dismissed as small quirks, now feel unsettling to him. Because of the conversation he had earlier that day, every little thing she does now seems suspicious. Still, he tries to stay calm and tells himself that she might just be testing him in some way. Determined not to provoke her, he makes the conscious decision to tolerate everything she does that evening. He even invites her to sit and eat at the same table with him, something he wouldn't usually allow. Whenever she makes mistakes that would have once annoyed him, he forgives her quickly without complaint. At certain moments when she appears to expect punishment, he surprises her by helping her instead. He even tells her to go rest in her room. This soft and gentle treatment catches the elf off guard. She is clearly surprised by the change in his behavior and does not know how to respond to it. After she leaves, the man activates a magical surveillance ring he had installed earlier. Through the ring, he begins to watch what the elf is doing in her room. But what he sees completely shocks him. The elf is not resting or acting harmlessly. She is calmly planning how to kill him. Her true feelings are revealed through her expressions and actions. She finds his behavior irritating and unnatural, and she is now considering ending his life. At that moment, the man realizes that everything his friend told him at the restaurant is actually true. The elf is not a helpless slave. She is powerful, dangerous, and only pretending. Overwhelmed by fear, he panics and rushes into her room without thinking. The elf is surprised by his sudden entrance, but she quickly hides her true intentions. She puts on an innocent face and politely asks why he has come to see her when he was the one who told her to rest. The man wants to tell her that he saw everything through the ring and knows what she is really planning. But as he stands there, he realizes that if she finds out he has discovered the truth, she might kill him immediately. So, after standing in silence for a moment and weighing his options carefully, Lord Theorad makes a sudden decision. He chooses not to confront the elf directly about what he has seen through the surveillance ring. Instead, he comes up with a risky plan that might help him stay alive a little longer. Forcing a calm tone into his voice, he tells the elf that, from that moment forward, she must walk around the mansion without wearing any clothes. He declares that this will be a new rule, and that it is part of the training she will undergo. Then he adds that her punishment will not be through beatings or pain, but rather through intense physical workouts that will challenge her strength and obedience. His voice is stern, and his expression is serious, but deep down, Theorad is terrified. This strange request and the punishment are part of a desperate act, an attempt to confuse and distract the elf, to throw her off from whatever deadly plan she may have, so he can stay alive. The elf is startled by this demand and tries to apologize immediately. She lowers her gaze and expresses regret for whatever offense she may have caused. But Lord Theorad ignores her apology. He acts cold and unfeeling, keeping up the image of someone too angry to be moved by her words. With a straight face and an air of command, he turns around and leaves her room without saying anything else. Inwardly, however, his heart is racing. He is not angry, he is scared. His only real goal is to survive, and he thinks that by playing the role of a cruel master and trainer, he might confuse her enough to avoid death. Lord Theorad is not known for cruelty. In fact, his reputation throughout the region is that of a merciful noble. He owns a large mansion where several servants and slaves work, but none of them fear being abused or mistreated. He is known to be gentle and just never raising a hand to punish anyone in a brutal way. A notable example of his kindness happened just a few weeks earlier. One of his elf slaves accidentally broke an antique vase, an item so rare and expensive that it could have easily been sold for the price of a small house. In any other noble household, such a mistake would have led to a brutal and bloody punishment. Most masters would not hesitate to tear off a slave's limbs or permanently as a warning to others. But Lord Theorad did not follow that path. Instead of violence, he simply ordered that the slave should skip a single meal as punishment. Later that night, one of the house slaves sees something that leaves her completely stunned. While carrying out a quiet task in the hallway, she happens to catch sight of the elf walking past without any clothes on. The moment shocks her so deeply that she freezes in place, unable to process what she's just seen. Her first thought is that the elf must be facing some sort of punishment, and the only one with the authority to enforce something like that is Lord Theorad. But this confuses her, because the man she knows as her master has never once treated his slaves with cruelty. She starts to question everything she believes about him. Lord Theorad is known throughout the estate as a kind and considerate man. He doesn't raise his voice, and he never uses violence on those who serve him. Even when another slave once broke a priceless vase, he had only punished her by skipping one meal. If that had happened in another noble household, the slave's limbs would likely have been torn apart. That is the kind of mercy he is known for. But now, seeing the elf exposed like this, the slave begins to wonder if her master is just like the rumors she has heard all her life, about how even the gentlest nobles turn into tyrants once they gain the title of lord. Her mind spins with fear and confusion. She wonders if Lord Theorad has always been hiding this side of himself, and now she worries whether she can keep what she saw tonight a secret for the rest of her life. The thought of speaking out fills her with dread. She fears what might happen if she talks, and equally fears what it means to stay silent. Meanwhile, Lord Theorad walks through the mansion grounds, leading the elf slave with him. They arrive at the courtyard, a quiet and sacred place that has been tended by generations of his family. It is a spot he has always treasured, a place of peace and reflection. But now, as he steps into it dragging the elf behind him, he feels out of place. This moment doesn't belong here. He doesn't know what he's doing or why he has brought her to this calm, gentle space while pretending to act like a master punishing his servant. Shame burns within him. Every part of this feels wrong. He tells himself that he is doing it to stay alive, to protect himself from someone who might be far more dangerous than she appears. Yet, despite that, he cannot help but feel embarrassed by the absurdity of the scene. He knows he is acting, but the weight of what he's doing begins to crush him. As they stand in the courtyard, the elf lowers her head and begins to apologize. Her voice is soft, her posture respectful, and she repeatedly asks him for forgiveness. Theorad stands quietly in front of the statue of his father, who passed away and now exists only in the afterlife. He feels a heavy weight in his heart and silently tells his father how deeply sorry he is for ever thinking of himself as a worthless child, someone who might bring ruin to the family that raised him. The thoughts haunt him as he tries to come to terms with who he is and what he is becoming. Afterwards, he begins to inflict punishment on the elf slave he owns. On the surface, it appears as though the elf is reacting to the pain, showing signs of suffering as expected. However, Theorad notices something strange. He realizes that she is secretly using magic mana to protect herself from real harm. She is acting as if she is in pain, but her body is clearly guarded by her hidden power. This makes Theorad aware that if he ever lets her find out that he knows the truth, his life could be in danger. So he decides to pretend along with her, keeping up the role he plays. As part of his act, he starts to lie to her. He claims that, because she is a proud and disobedient slave, he will treat her as nothing more than a source of entertainment, someone to be used and discarded. He tells her that if she ever breaks down or stops being useful, he will simply get another slave to replace her, since that is the destiny he assigns to her. He even goes so far as to tell her that he has been so cruel in the past that many of his slaves could not endure him and ended up dying. These words frighten the elf slave, and she appears to believe them, reacting with fear and desperation. She starts to beg him for mercy, completely unaware of the truth, that she is, in fact, the very first slave he has ever brought into his mansion. As time passes, Theorad starts to notice something odd. No matter how harshly he treats her, she does not seem truly afraid. Instead, she holds his gaze, looking directly into his eyes, which is strange for an elf slave. Typically, slaves of her kind are taught to avoid eye contact with their masters at all costs, as a sign of submission and obedience. But this one behaves differently. Her gaze is steady and even inviting, as though she wants the punishment to continue. This unsettles him, yet also intrigues him. Feeling a strange mix of anger, confusion, and desire, he tells her to position herself properly, planning to quickly take things further with her before anyone else in the household can find out. His mind races, remembering that he was the one who chose her at the market. Now he begins to suspect that she might not be an ordinary elf slave, but instead something more dangerous. Perhaps even a demon in disguise who has lured him into this twisted situation. However, in a moment of hesitation and shifting thought, Theorad suddenly changes his mind. Instead of doing what he originally intended, he steps forward, places his foot on her chest, and orders her to do something humiliating, to lick her foot. This action completely surprises the elf. It is not what she had expected from him, and for the first time she does not follow his command. Her reaction is genuine, and Theorad can clearly see it in her face. This unexpected honesty from her startles him. It makes him pause and question himself. He begins to wonder if he has taken things too far, if the punishment he has been delivering has crossed a line even he should not have passed. Theorad feels a shift in his thoughts and starts to lift his foot from the elf's chest, thinking to himself that he does not truly mean the harsh words he said earlier. Deep down, he feels a flicker of guilt and considers stopping the punishment. However, before he can act on this feeling, the elf suddenly grabs his foot and behaves as though she is willing to obey him. She acts like she will do whatever he says, but Theorad can see through her performance. He senses that she is pretending once again, and her actions do not match the fear she tries to show. As he watches her, a memory comes to him. He recalls a book he once read when he was younger, a book about elves. In that story, the elves were described as noble, kind-hearted beings who helped others without expecting anything in return. Theorad had believed that elves were a peaceful race, always guided by compassion and selflessness. That memory now clashes with the behavior of the elf slave before him, and it leaves him wondering where exactly she came from and what kind of background she truly has. By that time, the elf has already begun licking too, just as he told her to. She even mimics the behavior of a dog, following his command in a way that seems exaggerated and unnatural. Theorad then tells her that he is going to end the punishment. But in a sudden change of mood, instead of pulling away completely, he lowers his foot again and presses it down on her face. He pushes her head to the ground with firm pressure, making it clear that he is not yet ready to let the punishment end. The elf slave appears to beg him to stop, using her voice to plead for mercy. But at the same time, her body betrays her words. She pulls on her own ankle in a way that suggests she actually wants him to press harder. This strange contradiction puzzles Theorad, but he chooses to keep playing along, pretending to believe her while staying in control of the situation. He challenges her by pointing out that while she is begging him, her voice has returned to sounding like a human's. That unsettles him, and he warns her that if she dares to act like a human again, he will punish her even more severely. In truth, Theorad wants to stop everything. He is tired of the charade and the games, and part of him hopes she will follow his unspoken wish by staying silent and still. The elf's submission seems complete, and it appears she has already accepted the punishment in full. She remains on the ground, her posture reminiscent of a dog, obedient and silent. Theorad, sensing that she's content with this state, gestures for her to rise, signaling that it's time to leave the room. However, she stays still, giving off subtle cues that suggest she needs something more. Theorad immediately understands what she requires, but as he processes the situation, a wave of discomfort spreads through him. He feels an unease at the idea of engaging in a physical interaction with her, knowing that she holds more power over him than any emperor could. The thought of working out with someone who commands such terrifying authority unsettles him. Despite this discomfort, Theorad knows he has to fulfill her need. He hesitates, wondering about the dynamics between them, wondering if he can truly have this workout with her on her terms, or if it will only happen when he's ready. His mind races as he considers the power he holds over her, even though he knows refusing her could lead to dire consequences. He wonders if he can maintain some control, setting boundaries without inciting her wrath. Eventually, he decides to confirm whether it's physical exercise she wants. He tells her that he can only engage in it when he deems it appropriate, trying to set his own terms and boundaries. However, upon seeing her reaction to his words, it becomes clear that she is not interested in what he assumed. She seems uninterested in the idea of a physical workout, and Theorad realizes that she may want something entirely different. He decides to let her speak more freely, granting her permission to express herself as a human, without the need to remain in a subservient role. It is then that she reveals her true intention, though not in the way he expected. What she wants is much simpler than he anticipated. She needs to release herself. Theorad is taken aback, feeling a sense of disbelief. His mind races as he processes this revelation. Why does she need permission to use the bathroom? There are plenty of restrooms in the mansion, and she could easily go without needing his approval. This puzzles him, and his thoughts drift to a book his father once bought, a strange and uncomfortable tome he read long ago. One of the chapters describes something called play, an act associated with hobgoblins. The realization hits him like a jolt. Could this be what the elf desires? Is this why she insists on asking him for permission? Perhaps it's an interaction of humiliation or dominance, something outside of the ordinary. Though part of him wants to dismiss the thought entirely, Theorad knows better than to assume anything too quickly. He decides not to intervene, choosing instead to observe the elf's behavior. He gives her the freedom to act as she wishes, to make the next move on her own. He holds back, curious to see if she will take advantage of the situation. But instead of acting right away, she stays still, her gaze fixed on the statue of his father in the corner of the room. This confuses Theorad even more. Could she be considering using on the statue? He wonders if she wants to test him, to see if he will allow her to desecrate his father's statue. The thought disturbs him, and he begins to question whether he is being manipulated not just by the elf but by the situation itself. He holds back, waiting, as the moments stretch on. The elf does nothing, yet her intense focus on the statue only deepens his suspicions. Perhaps she is not simply evaluating him, but testing how far he will go, questioning whether he is truly a man of principles or just a weak fool who would tolerate such an act. Theorad, though aware of the immense power the elf wielded over him, was not prepared to let her desecrate something that held so much meaning to him, his father's statue. The statue was a symbol of respect, love, and the legacy of his family, and the idea of allowing her to disrespect it was something he couldn't stomach, even if his own fear of her was considerable. The elf, seemingly unaware or uncaring of his inner conflict, asked him where she should herself. The question cut through him, forcing him to confront the reality of the situation. He understood all too well that if he made the wrong decision now, if he let his fear guide him, he could very well end up dead within the mansion. Yet, the weight of the decision bore down on him, and despite the consequences, he gave her the permission to do as she wished. However, the elf hesitated for a moment. Perhaps she was considering the significance of the statue, wondering whether it was truly hers to defile. Theorad, feeling the tension in the air, quickly dismissed her hesitation. He told her not to worry about it, explaining that since his father had already passed away, it was no longer his place to prevent her actions. He gave her permission to proceed, though in his heart, a small part of him died with the words. As she moved forward and began to release herself on the statue, Theorad's thoughts were consumed by guilt and regret. His heart was heavy, and he silently asked for his father's forgiveness, knowing that he had failed his family and tarnished the values they had stood for. Once the elf had finished, Theorad's inner turmoil reached its peak. His mind swirled with a desire to reclaim some semblance of authority, to punish her for what she had done, even though part of him wondered if he could truly do so. In a moment of weakness, he demanded that she lick the from the statue as a form of retribution, hoping to assert some control over the situation. But as soon as the words left his mouth, he saw the elf's reaction, a mixture of irritation and disgust. The smell clearly repulsed her, and she pleaded with him, begging him not to force her to comply with his order. Theorad pulls her back into the house. He sees that everyone is sleeping. He tells her to stand so she can return to her bed, but she says she still wants more punishment. This surprises Theorad because he did not think she would still be unsatisfied after peeing on his father's statue. He starts to think about what else she might want. He worries that he might get killed if he forces her into her room without doing anything. So, he tries hard to think of something she wants from him. Then, he remembers that he had promised to torture her with exercise before. He sees that she is now asking for that torture. Theorad knows that he is also new to exercise. He does not know anything about working out yet, so he cannot do it with her now. Because of this, he thinks of another thing he can do to please her. He tells her to lie down facing him. He takes off his shoe and offers his feet for her to lick. But he sees that her reaction does not show satisfaction. Also, he did this to her earlier, so he wonders what else he can do. Just then, he realizes something. He uses his feet to gently touch her body. From her reaction, he can tell that she is really enjoying it. She even starts making sounds. He quickly tells her to stop making loud noises so others will not wake up, and she listens immediately. After an extended period of tormenting her in such a manner, Theorad can no longer bear to witness her responses. His mind, clouded with the realization that he has pushed her beyond any reasonable limit, urges him to stop before he escalates the situation further. He senses, from her tearful yet almost anticipatory expressions, that there is an unspoken desire within her for something beyond the pain he is inflicting. Her reactions, though marked by suffering, betray a deeper yearning, one that makes him reconsider the direction of his actions. Trying to understand this silent plea, he follows her gaze, hoping it will reveal what she truly seeks. His eyes track the direction of her focus, and to his surprise, she is staring intently at the burning candle. A fleeting memory crosses his mind, reminding him of how, from the very beginning, she has shown an unmistakable desire for the flame's torture. This realization comes swiftly, almost as if he has overlooked it in the haze of the previous moments. Compelled by this understanding, he moves toward the candle, carefully lifting it, knowing full well the cruel implications of what he is about to do. He threatens to pour the hot wax on her body, not merely as a punishment but to gauge her obedience. His intention is clear. If she complies, the torment will end. If not, the punishment will intensify. He demands that she cease her tears and smile at him, as a sign of her submission, to spare herself further pain. Yet, despite his offer, she continues to sob, undeterred by his command. It is then that he fully comprehends the depth of her desire. She isn't recoiling from the torment. Rather, she seems to crave it, to seek it out as part of a darker longing. With this in mind, he begins the torturous act, letting the hot wax drip onto her skin. Her screams fill the air, sharp and raw, but Theorad, unaffected by her cries, commands her to silence herself, for he will not relent. She, desperate to obey, quickly clamps her hand over her mouth, stifling the noise as best as she can. However, as the pain continues, something shifts within Theorad. The more he subjects her to her desired suffering, the more uncomfortable he becomes. His actions, though initially driven by a cold, detached sense of power, begin to weigh on him. He does not derive pleasure from her pain, nor can he find any satisfaction in her submission. The realization strikes him with an unsettling force. He is tiring, both mentally and emotionally, from the cruelty he is forcing upon her. Unable to endure any further, he abruptly casts the candle aside and, in a rare moment of fatigue, declares the session over. Telling her to clean up the mess, he retreats to his room, seeking solace in the solitude that awaits him. But even as he closes the door behind him, uncertainty lingers in his mind. He is still haunted by the thought of how the elf will react to the events of the day. Will she be broken by the torment, or will she find satisfaction in it? Unwilling to wait for an answer, he turns to his surveillance system, watching through the hidden cameras as she recovers from the ordeal. As the footage unfolds before his eyes, a strange sense of relief washes over him when he sees her demeanor shift. She has, indeed, found pleasure in the torture he has inflicted, a twisted satisfaction that leaves him both unsettled and strangely satisfied by her response. Theorad feels a sense of relief, knowing he has survived the day's events, but that relief is short-lived. A troubling thought lingers in his mind. Is this truly the way he will continue each day? The repetitive nature of it unsettles him, and he knows that to maintain control, he must escalate the torture. The thought weighs heavily on him. He cannot afford to let the intensity of the punishment wane, for that would risk losing the dominance he has worked so hard to establish. But as he contemplates this, another concern arises. He knows that the slave might soon request some form of exercise, some way to keep her body in shape, and the realization hits him that he knows nothing about such matters. Theorad considers, with growing unease, that perhaps the best course of action would be to find a way to send her away before things spiral beyond his control. Early the next morning, one of the workers in the mansion carried out his usual duties, starting with bowing before the statue of Theorad's father, as part of the routine the staff adhered to. However, as he lowered his head, a strong and unpleasant odor reached his nose, the unmistakable smell of urine. Startled, he immediately lifted his head and glanced around, trying to determine the source of the scent. At first, he thought it might be the work of the troublemakers in the mansion, those individuals who had always caused mischief. The thought sparked a sense of urgency in him, and he made up his mind to confront them immediately. But then, a more serious notion settled in his mind. He couldn't let this offense go unpunished. Whoever was responsible, he would make sure they paid for what they had done. Tarnishing the family's honor, even in such a seemingly small way, was something he could not and would not allow. He decided he would report the matter to Theorad later, but for now, his focus was on tracking down those who dared to disrespect the mansion in this way. Meanwhile, Lord Theorad was already preparing to send a letter to the person who had sold the elf to him. The letter was sharp, filled with veiled threats, demanding that the seller come and take the elf back. Despite his resolve to be rid of her, Theorad still felt a lingering unease. The possibility of having to deal with her physical needs, such as exercise, was an uncomfortable thought. He couldn't help but wonder if there was more he needed to know about keeping her in shape, but he decided that, rather than research it himself, he should consult with someone more knowledgeable first. The idea of learning about workouts made him feel vulnerable, and he wasn't ready to appear weak in his handling of the situation. Instead, he planned to talk to a certain person who might offer some insight. Elsewhere in the mansion, another scenario was unfolding. A man was engaging in a private workout session with a maid, the same maid who had seen Theorad the previous night. The maid, feeling nervous, kept glancing at the door, worried that someone might unexpectedly walk in and catch them in the act. The man, sensing her unease, reassured her. He told her not to worry about it. No one could just walk into his room like that. However, he did advise her to keep quiet and avoid making any noise that might draw unwanted attention. After a while of intense exercise, the man pauses, suggesting that the maid wait inside while he goes to get her something to drink. As he steps out of the room, a quiet remark escapes his lips, commenting on how great the break feels. His words, however, aren't as private as he assumes. Just as he mutters to himself, he comes face to face with Theorad, who is about to enter his own room. The sudden encounter startles the man, who hadn't expected his lord to be here, especially not in such a casual setting. Theorad, though calm, asks about the comment, causing the man's heart to skip a beat. He had never imagined Theorad would be nearby, and the weight of the situation hits him hard. The knight, trying to regain composure, wonders if his lord has seen anything that would explain the comment, but Theorad simply states that he hasn't witnessed anything, just overheard the remark. The knight exhales in relief, his nerves slowly calming as the tension begins to fade. Now, with some semblance of control over the situation, he becomes curious about the purpose of Theorad's visit. But before he can voice his question, Theorad addresses him directly by name, an unmistakable sign of seriousness. The Lord's tone, resolute and firm, makes it clear that this is no casual conversation. The request that follows is unexpected and leaves the knight stunned. Theorad wants him to teach him about working out. The shock is evident in the knight's reaction, as he had never anticipated such a request from his lord. After a moment of reflection, Bainin considers that Theorad's curiosity might simply be a result of his age and the natural tendency to seek new experiences. Still, he makes it clear that working out is not something he can directly teach. He wants to ensure that he handles the situation with more control. Understanding Theorad's concerns, Bainin decides to help him further. He gives Theorad a card to a place where he can go and try out the experience first. Bainin tells him that when he arrives, he should mention his name to the people there, as they will assist him. However, he warns Theorad that the people at this establishment won't be kind or gentle with him. Bainin also offers to accompany Theorad if he wishes, suggesting that having him there might make the experience less daunting. but he leaves the decision up to Theorad. Just as Bainin and Theorad continue their conversation, the door opens and a figure enters the room, drawing both of their attention. It is the same man from earlier, the one who had been in the mansion, a familiar figure to Theorad, though they hadn't expected him to be here now. The man, who is actually the chief servant named Havid, had apparently checked in on Theorad's apartment earlier, not realizing that the young lord would be in the midst of a conversation with Bainin. His unexpected arrival causes both Theorad and Bainin to turn their heads, surprised to see him standing there. Havid calls out to Theorad, his voice catching their attention. Theorad, slightly taken aback by the timing of the intrusion, quickly answers him, informing him that he had come to discuss something with Bainin. He then pauses and, curious about the sudden appearance of the chief servant, inquires why Havid is here, especially when he thought he should have been overseeing the other servants at the mansion. The question lingers in the air as Theorad's mind processes the interruption. Havid, though, does not immediately respond to the question regarding his duties. Instead, he begins to explain the purpose of his visit. With a serious tone, he informs Theorad that he has come to report a heinous act he witnessed that morning. Before he can continue with his explanation, Bainin, sensing the potential danger of the situation, begins to panic. His thoughts race as he fears that Havid might have witnessed something he would prefer remain hidden, specifically, his recent workout session with the maid, Rivera. The thought of that secret coming to light fills Bainin with anxiety, and he starts to fidget. Theorad, sensing Bainin's unease, turns his focus back to Havid and asks for clarification, wanting to know more about the nature of the act that Havid is reporting. The chief servant, after a brief pause, reveals that he suspects someone has urinated on his father's statue. The moment the words leave Havid's mouth, Bainin's tension begins to ease, a feeling of relief washing over him as he realizes that the situation is not about Rivera. He quickly makes the decision to discreetly slip away from the conversation before anything else can be revealed about his private actions. Havid, oblivious to Bainin's retreat, continues his explanation, further suspecting that the offense might have been committed by one of the servants in the household. He explains the gravity of the situation, emphasizing that such an act of disrespect should be punished. Theorad, however, interrupts him with a suggestion, one that causes a flicker of realization to cross Havid's face. Theorad raises the possibility that it may not have been a servant at all who defiled the statue. Instead, he proposes the idea that it could have been a beast, something far less predictable, that was responsible. As Theorad suggests this possibility, a smile plays at the edge of his lips, though he hides it well. In his mind, he feels a sense of relief, realizing that the elf's actions from the previous night, when he had asked her to urinate on the statue, have gone unnoticed. No one has caught wind of it, and for the moment, he is safe from any potential repercussions of his unusual request. Havid stands there, stunned by Theorad's suggestion of a beast. He knows full well that Theorad does not keep any creatures in the mansion. No animals, not even a common bird. Such things were foreign to their home, and Havid is momentarily thrown off by the remark. Theorad, however, has no intention of discussing beasts in the way Havid assumes. As the words leave his mouth, he realizes how out of place they sound and quickly corrects his thoughts. He had not meant an actual beast. Rather, his comment had been a subtle way of dodging the real issue at hand, attempting to divert attention away from the elf's involvement. In that moment, Theorad decides it would be best to let Havid handle the matter. He knows well that no matter how thoroughly he interrogates the servants, the truth might never come to light. There are too many ways the offense could have been committed under their noses without anyone noticing. Therefore, Theorad steps back into his usual facade, one that reveals his disdain for the situation and his decision to not pursue it any further. He expresses that, although he finds the act utterly disgraceful, he is willing to let it slide. He grants Havid full permission to go ahead and find out who the offender is, though Theorad has little faith that anything will come of it. Havid, unaware of the internal reasoning behind Theorad's decision, nods solemnly. He assures Theorad that he will do everything in his power to track down the culprit, promising to investigate thoroughly. As the servant begins to leave, Theorad calls him back, his mind already shifting gears to his next task. He hands over the letter he had written earlier that morning, a letter meant for the person who had sold him the elf. He asks Havid to deliver it through a witch, a request that is customary but crucial for keeping matters discreet. Havid accepts the task, understanding the importance of handling such communications with care. Just as Havid is about to depart, he pauses and turns to Theorad, remembering something important. He tells Theorad that there is a special guest in the mansion, someone he had forgotten to mention earlier. The guest, Havid explains, is Lady Ashley, the second daughter of Count Pelgaroin. Theorad's expression softens slightly at the mention of Lady Ashley's name. She is his fiancée, a match arranged by his father with the Count. Though the engagement had initially been a formality, over time, Theorad has come to see Ashley in a different light. She is gentle and kind, her demeanor radiating warmth. People often refer to her as a saint due to her charitable nature and her willingness to help others without hesitation. Theorad's admiration for Ashley grows with each passing day. She is a smart woman, with an ability to see things clearly and act decisively. Theorad finds that he enjoys her company, and it is not long before he begins to entertain the thought that perhaps marrying her and starting a family together might not be such a bad idea after all. As soon as Theorad hears about Ashley's presence in the mansion, a sense of urgency strikes him. He feels a pang of guilt for making her wait, but at the same time, a mixture of confusion and concern overtakes him. Havid had already arranged for the finest refreshments to be served to Ashley, yet Theorad's thoughts quickly spiral when he learns that Ashley had chosen the elf as her personal attendant. Havid's revelation that Ashley had even expressed affection for the elf surprises him, though the shock is fleeting as it is quickly overshadowed by his growing sense of unease. He can't fathom why his fiancée would choose to show kindness to a creature like the elf, a demon in his eyes, who seems to take every gesture of goodwill as an insult. In his mind, he fears that the elf might grow tired of Ashley's kindness, and that could lead to something far more dangerous. He can't stop the words from slipping out, a muttered warning about the elf possibly turning on Ashley. Havid, ever the loyal servant, quickly snaps him back to reality, cautioning him to be mindful of what he says. Theorad realizes, to his dismay, that he has let his guard down, and words have escaped him in his distracted state. The sudden realization fills him with even more discomfort. The thought that something might go wrong, that the elf could harm Ashley, hangs over him like a dark cloud. Determined to take control of the situation, Theorad forces himself to regain composure. He feigns indifference, masking his inner turmoil. With an air of calmness, he instructs Havid to lead the way to the reception room, despite the storm of thoughts swirling in his mind. He knows he needs to stop the elf before anything spirals out of control. Meanwhile, in the room, Bainin and Rivera are in a state of panic. They listen intently, trying to gauge when Theorad and Havid will leave so they can safely continue what they were doing. Bainin, in particular, hadn't expected the visit. He feels the weight of the situation pressing on him, knowing that if they are caught, the consequences will be dire. Rivera, too, is uneasy, though she shares Bainin's surprise. Both of them had assumed they were safe, but now they realize the room they are using isn't as secure as they thought. The tension between them heightens as the realization dawns that they might not be as hidden as they had hoped. Rivera's mind races back to the conversation she overheard between Havid and Theorad. She recalls the mention of someone urinating on the statue. Her thoughts quickly shift to the elf and to Theorad, remembering the incident from the night before. A wave of dread passes through her. She hopes, with everything in her, that it wasn't the elf who committed such an act. Theorad stands at the threshold of his chamber, a sense of quiet acceptance settling over him. He recognizes the situation as his own doing. His choice to bring the elf into the mansion was his karma to bear. Though he doesn't know if it's a sin deserving of retribution, he resolves not to place blame on anyone else. He acknowledges his role in bringing the elf here, and he decides that his responsibility lies in addressing any consequences that may arise. However, the one thing he cannot accept is if someone innocent, someone not connected to him, suffers because of the elf's actions. That would be something he could never forgive. As Theorad approaches his chamber, his arrival is announced, and he steps inside, relieved to find that the atmosphere is calm, as he had hoped. There are no signs of quarrels or disputes, everything seems to be in order. His gaze immediately falls on Ashley, his fiancée, and he is struck by her usual tranquility. Her gracefulness is like the flow of a river or the vastness of the sea, immeasurable and serene. In that moment, he wonders how anyone could ever dislike her. With her kind and open-hearted nature, Theorad motions for Havid to leave, requesting some private time with his fiancée. Havid, understanding the unspoken command, steps back and ensures no one else enters, leaving the two alone. As Theorad prepares to leave, he briefly contemplates taking the elf with him, but he knows that in the mansion, slaves are treated as objects, and such an action is not permitted. He leaves without her, despite the urge to handle the situation more directly. Approaching Ashley, Theorad offers an apology for keeping her waiting. She smiles warmly and brushes it off, saying that it is no trouble at all. She admits that she had lost track of time while admiring the elf, who had been with her during her wait. Theorad feels a pang of discomfort at the thought of Ashley's growing affection for the elf, but he quickly masks it. As he speaks to her, he notices a certain expression on the elf's face, a silent, unreadable gaze. Theorad hopes that the elf understands his position. He can only humiliate her once Ashley has been sent away. For now, he urges the elf to remain patient. Ashley gazes at the elf with admiration, captivated by her beauty. She is aware of the rarity of seeing an elf, considering the small population of their kind. She knows that if all the elves were gathered together, they could easily be counted on the fingers of a single hand. The elves have always been reclusive, dwelling deep within the forests, isolated from the world, and rarely stepping beyond the boundaries of their dominion. Ashley's fascination grows, knowing how extraordinary it is to encounter one in person. Theorad, meanwhile, reflects on how Ashley's chance to see an elf was not as fortunate as it seemed. If not for the slave hunters who capture elves who lose their way in the forest, Ashley would likely never have had the opportunity. The elf slave he bought had, in fact, allowed herself to be captured intentionally, knowing it was a path she could take, even if it meant becoming a slave. Then Ashley, curious, turns to Theorad and asks him whether the elf is truly young, given her status as a slave. She points out that a 100-year-old elf would easily overpower any slave hunters, treating them as if they were mere children. The question surprises Theorad, as he didn't realize Ashley had such knowledge of elves. It makes him wonder how much she truly understands about the elf's world and capabilities. After a brief pause, Theorad responds, clarifying that the elf is actually about 25 years old in human age. This revelation catches Ashley off guard, as she had assumed the elf was much older than her. She hadn't realized that the elf was only a few years older than herself, and with a slight flush of embarrassment, she admits that she may have been treating her disrespectfully without knowing the truth. Theorad watches Ashley's growing sympathy toward the elf. He realizes that she's beginning to soften, perhaps more than he anticipated. He sees that, at this rate, her concern for the elf could lead her to act impulsively, and he's unsure if that would be in anyone's best interest, least of all hers. So, to prevent the situation from spiraling any further, he decides to shift the conversation away from the elf and toward something more neutral. He casually asks her about the reason she has come to visit him today without any prior notice. However, his seemingly innocent question catches Ashley off guard. She is momentarily confused and asks, her voice tinged with concern, if her visit is unwelcome. This startles Theorad, and he quickly realizes that his question may have sounded dismissive. Immediately, he reassures her, hastily clarifying that he does not mean it in any negative way. He explains that he is merely inquiring if there is something specific she wants to discuss, thinking perhaps she has something important to bring up but not wanting her to feel that her visit is unwelcome in any way. To his relief, Ashley seems to take his explanation in stride, and she admits that, indeed, she has come to speak with him about a particular matter. She goes on to explain that her father, the Count, is preparing to leave for the capital soon, and in anticipation of this, he has begun calling together all his far-reaching forces. This, she confides, seems unusual to her. While it is not uncommon for her father to prepare for such a trip, the way he is acting, gathering his forces without a clear reason, raises suspicions in her mind. Theorad, knowing that such concerns could be dangerous to voice aloud, gently cautions her, urging her to be careful in how she thinks about her father's actions. He tries to frame it as merely a strategic move, perhaps an overzealous measure to ensure that his affairs are in order before he leaves. However, Ashley is adamant. She insists that her father's behavior goes beyond simple discipline or preparation. It strikes her as something more, something that raises her concerns about his true intentions. Theorad can't help but feel the weight of Ashley's words. He knows that, if other nobles hear her speak so openly about her father's actions, it could incite anger or even worse, lead to a scandal. The nobility would surely take offense at her insinuations, especially her indirect criticism of the kingdom's ruler, His Majesty. But as he watches Ashley, her brow furrowed in genuine concern, he understands that it is her trust in him that allows her to speak so freely. She isn't simply voicing accusations. She's sharing her fears with someone she believes can understand. Continuing, Ashley explains that, because of the strange developments at home, her father has made a decision that takes her by surprise. He will be entrusting the country's leadership into Theorad's hands while he is away. This, she says, is why she feels it is crucial to speak with him. Theorad is taken aback. Theorad is taken aback when Ashley reveals that her father, the Count, would want him to serve as regent in his absence. The suggestion strikes him as both unexpected and overwhelming. Yet, Ashley defends the decision, assuring him that despite his recent rise to head of the household, he is more than fit for the role. She even goes so far as to say that Theorad already embodies the essence of Deharim territory, feeling as though he is practically the Viscount in all but name. This takes Theorad by surprise. While he always knew that he would one day assume the responsibilities of a higher rank, he never expected such an offer to come so soon. He had envisioned a gradual transition, not an immediate leap into power. As he contemplates this, his mind begins to spin with the weight of the responsibility, and he struggles to reconcile his newfound position with his expectations. Just then, the elf speaks up, asking if there is anything he needs. At first, Theorad responds that he doesn't need anything, but as the words leave his mouth, he realizes he must address her presence more definitively. The elf, after all, is a constant reminder of the strange and complex dynamics at play in his life, and he feels the need to maintain control over her. Without much thought, he decides to assert his authority over her. He abuses her verbally, humiliating her with cruel words, before abruptly pouring the drink in front of him over her head. He lashes out, questioning why she would still be unsatisfied after the lesson he had supposedly taught her the previous night. The elf's apology is quick, though it does little to satisfy Theorad's frustration. Ashley watches, her eyes wide in shock. She had never seen such behavior from Theorad, and the harshness with which he treats the elf leaves her feeling uneasy. What she doesn't know is that Theorad's treatment of the elf is not born from malice toward her personally, but from a deeper, more complex fear. He knows that if he doesn't maintain control, if he doesn't keep the elf in line, she could one day turn on him or worse on Ashley. Yet, this explanation remains hidden from Ashley, leaving her with the impression that Theorad's cruelty is just part of his character. As the scene unfolds, the cup that Theorad poured out over the elf's head falls to the floor and shatters. The elf is ordered to clean it up, but she hesitates, appearing terrified. In a calculated move, she deliberately causes one of the broken shards to cut her skin, and she begins crying, claiming that she's hurt herself. Theorad, caught off guard, is left in a state of confusion. He doesn't know how to react, especially in front of Ashley, who is watching intently. For a long moment, he stands silent, unsure whether to show any sign of sympathy or to remain indifferent. Ashley, however, is visibly upset. The elf's apparent distress, combined with Theorad's cold indifference, strikes her as cruel, and she begins to form a harsh opinion of him. Her thoughts start to shift, and she starts seeing him in a new, less favorable light. She begins to see him as little more than a hoodlum, indifferent to the pain of others. Unable to bear the growing tension, Theorad finally decides to explain himself. He tells Ashley that his behavior is driven by a condition, a disease he has been battling. He claims that if he doesn't humiliate a slave regularly, the disease will kill him. It is a strange and desperate explanation, one that he hopes will offer some insight into his actions. But as soon as the words leave his mouth, Theorad knows that no one, especially Ashley, will believe him. True to his fears, Ashley doesn't buy his explanation. Ashley, with a serious expression, asked Theorad for permission to say something. As she spoke those words, Theorad felt a deep, sinking dread in his chest. He could already sense that Ashley was about to make an ultimatum, most likely intending to end their relationship. He knew that if she did, his life would be shattered. There would be no coming back from it, no redemption, no way to undo the damage. The thought alone was enough to cripple him with regret. He had already wronged her with his harsh treatment of the elf and his strange behavior, and now, this was the moment where it could all fall apart. In that moment, he felt an overwhelming sense of sorrow for Ashley. Even before she spoke, he knew the damage had already been done, and it couldn't be fixed. His own heart felt heavy with guilt, and as he looked at her, he decided to say what he thought she needed to hear. He urged her to hate him, to move on from him, since he had already resigned himself to being the villain in this story. He had always been used to being seen as the antagonist, but he never imagined that Ashley would see him that way too. He braced for the inevitable, hoping, at the very least, that Ashley could find peace without him. Ashley, however, did not react the way he feared. Instead, she walked toward the elf and, with surprising gentleness, lifted her up from the ground. She spoke softly, telling the elf not to pick up the broken glass again and reassuring her that there were certain orders, even as a slave, that she didn't need to obey. This moment of kindness made Theorad feel both ashamed and conflicted. It reminded him that, in his frustration, he had allowed his prejudices to cloud his judgment. He had humiliated the elf, not because of any personal fault but simply because of who she was. A demon in his eyes, something less than human. It was a harsh realization that made him feel even more alienated from Ashley. She then turned to the elf, asking her name. The elf, with downcast eyes, responded that she didn't know her name. Ashley, with genuine compassion, then offered the elf an opportunity to leave with her, promising to treat her well at the castle. The elf hesitated, looking between Ashley and Theorad, and in that moment, Theorad's heart pounded in his chest. He could not let Ashley take the elf with her. The elf was his property, his responsibility, and though he had no real affection for her, the idea of her leaving with Ashley was something he couldn't allow. He intervened immediately, warning Ashley not to take his slave home. He made it clear that he was the one who had purchased her and therefore had ownership over her, a fact that carried weight in their world. Ashley, however, did not respond to his warning. Instead, she took a moment, as if deciding what to do, before turning to the elf. She said that whichever master the elf chose would be the one she would serve. The elf, after a long pause, chose Theorad, telling Ashley that she had already dedicated herself fully to him and had promised to serve him forever. The elf's words struck Theorad in a way he didn't expect. The elf wasn't just bound to him out of circumstance. She had made a commitment, one that she now honored, even in the face of Ashley's offer of a different future. Ashley, respecting the elf's decision, nodded quietly. She turned away, heading for the door, and as she did, she asked Theorad not to follow her, saying she would leave on her own. Theorad stood frozen for a moment, his heart aching as she left, but he knew there was nothing he could do to stop her. Her departure left a heavy silence in the room, one that seemed to stretch endlessly. Soon after, Havid entered the room, his eyes scanning the floor where the broken glass lay. He asked if everything was all right, noticing the tension in the air. Theorad, feeling utterly drained, simply responded that he was fine, though he didn't feel fine at all. His heart felt hollow. As Ashley sat in her carriage, the rhythm of the wheels rolling along the cobblestones offered no comfort as her thoughts swirled like a storm. She couldn't help but reflect on the Theorad she once knew, the kind-hearted, responsible man who always treated servants with kindness and respect. He never belittled those beneath him, nor did he speak cruelly to anyone, especially not to slaves. He was the type of person who would stand up for what was right when it was needed, someone who valued his responsibilities and made sure to carry them out to the best of his abilities. But now, as she thought about the Theorad she had just left behind, she found herself questioning when everything had changed. When had he become the man who tortured and humiliated his own slave? The thought alone gnawed at her, and she tried to rationalize his behavior, searching for some deeper reason that could explain his actions. She briefly entertained the possibility that he had done it to drive a wedge between them, perhaps hoping that his cruelty would push her away, making it easier for him to call off their engagement. But even as she considered this, Ashley quickly dismissed the idea. She knew Theorad well enough to understand that he was no fool. If he married her, the second daughter of the Count, his family would see its reputation rise, and the financial gains from the alliance would be immense. There was no reason for him to sabotage their relationship like that. A new realization dawned on her. The only possible explanation left, one that seemed to make sense, was the elf. As she recalled the earlier events, Ashley remembered how Theorad had acted out of character, his anger directed at the slave as though he were playing a role. It didn't feel like his usual self. But why? Why would he, of all people, show such concern for a mere slave, especially an elf? She couldn't understand it, and the more she thought about it, the more questions piled up in her mind. She had to know the truth, but the timing wasn't right. She couldn't just go up to Theorad and ask him outright. She would have to wait for the right moment, wait until he was appointed as the regent and settled into the castle. Only then would she have the opportunity to speak with him privately and get the answers she needed. But even as she sat there, her mind racing, a sense of impatience began to take hold. How long could she wait? The questions in her mind were burning too brightly to be ignored. Yet, she knew she couldn't rush into telling her father about her suspicions. Not yet. Later that night, deep within the grand halls of Deharam's mansion, Theorad sits solemnly by his father's statue. The cold marble casts long shadows in the dimly lit room, and his thoughts are heavy with regret, gnawing at him like a persistent ache. He curses himself for being so foolish earlier when Ashley had visited. He knows that if he were in Ashley's shoes, he wouldn't have believed his weak excuse either. Instead, he realizes that he should have just told Ashley the truth, that he is punishing the elf for her actions. At least then, he might have salvaged his engagement, avoided making things worse. But now, sitting here reflecting, he can't help but think of the saying people often repeat, that there's no use in regretting the past. Theorad disagrees. He feels differently. That saying, he thinks, only applies to those who can amend their actions, who still have a chance to make things right. And in his case, he knows that the damage is done. There's no going back. His guilt weighs heavily on him, reminding him that he allowed the situation to spiral out of control. The elf's manipulative behavior wasn't an accident. It was calculated, deliberate. She is trying to ruin him, destroy every relationship he holds dear, especially his engagement with Ashley. He recalls how she had looked at him earlier, acting out as if testing his limits, seeing how far she could push him. She isn't just a slave to him. She is trying to make him hers. And in doing so, she is trying to tear apart his life. As Theorad sits there, frustration builds within him. He can't sit idly by and let things unfold this way. He can't let the elf continue her games without intervening. So he makes a decision. For now, he will give the elf what she seems to want, pretending to play along with her schemes. In the meantime, he'll search for a solution. There must be a way out of this, he tells himself, a way to regain control of his life and future. Just then, a servant enters, holding a letter. Theorad takes it, narrowing his eyes at the unfamiliar seal. A sense of curiosity stirs within him. He doesn't recognize the seal, but he assumes it's from the slave merchant he wrote to earlier that morning. The merchant's response, perhaps? He had hoped for a quick reply, something to indicate that the elf could be taken off his hands. But as he examines the seal, Theorad wonders if this is the answer he's been waiting for. With growing anticipation, he opens the letter, hoping that the merchant has agreed to take the elf back. That would be the best outcome. But before he can read the letter, something catches his attention. The elf appears in front of him, having arrived before him. The timing shocks Theorad. He assumes it should be Havid who brings him the letter, so he doesn't understand why it is the elf who delivers it instead. He believes that if things had gone as usual, Havid would have brought him the letter the next morning. But now, with the elf having opened the mailbox, it suggests that she has taken the letter without permission. This only strengthens his belief that she deserves punishment. He feels certain that the elf must have intentionally opened the letter, knowing that her actions would result in consequences. When Theorad inspects the letter carefully, he notices there is no sign it has been opened. This leads him to wonder if the elf might have used magic to peer through the envelope. However, as he thinks further, he feels confident that even if the elf is as powerful as a great sorcerer, she wouldn't be able to read a letter folded in such a complex way. And if she can, it would have taken her a long time. Therefore, Theorad hopes that the elf does not have any ulterior motives in bringing the letter. He proceeds to read the letter, while the elf quietly sneaks behind him to catch a glimpse of its contents. The merchant's response is clear. He refuses to allow Theorad to return the elf to him. The merchant states that Theorad should have asked him earlier whether a 250-year-old elf is dangerous, as he would have gladly answered. Now, however, he will not accept the elf back. He even warns Theorad not to bother searching for him, as he has already made enough money and plans to start a new life in the Mahakam dukedom. Theorad understands that if he decides to search for the merchant in the Mahakam dukedom, it could stir tensions between the empire and the dukedom, potentially leading to a serious conflict. He realizes that such a move could provoke the emperor's disapproval, resulting in harsh chastisement. The merchant, fully aware of the possible consequences, ends his letter by urging Theorad to live a peaceful life with the elf he has purchased, subtly suggesting that he refrain from any further actions that might escalate the situation. Fuming with anger over the merchant's tone, Theorad wonders how such a merchant would dare to mock him, a lord of the prestigious De Harem family. His position, backed by the trust of the count, should afford him respect and authority. Yet, now he finds himself tangled in a situation he did not foresee. His life disrupted by the very elf slave he had acquired. The merchant's arrogance only fuels his frustration, amplifying the sense that his circumstances are spiraling out of control. Theorad's gaze shifts to the elf, and he notices the subtle shift in her expression, a hint that she might want something. Still, he finds it hard to justify punishing her solely for bringing him the letter. In the past, when his maids made minor mistakes, he would simply issue a warning and send them on their way. But the elf's situation feels different, and he cannot let it slide without reprimanding her. Rising from his seat, he prepares to scold and humiliate her as he typically does. But something about this moment makes him hesitate for just a moment. As the elf tries to apologize for her actions, Theorad cuts her off sharply, commanding her not to speak back. His frustration builds as he accuses her of having stained the letter, an act that he finds completely unacceptable. He demands that she find a way to relieve his displeasure, his tone cold and commanding. Yet, the elf only offers a quiet apology, and Theorad, still irked, informs her that mere words will not suffice. He dismisses her, telling her to leave his presence, as he no longer wants to see her face. The elf informs Theorad that she cannot leave, but insists on being punished. In that moment, Theorad realizes that she still desires punishment, yet he hasn't decided what to do that would truly satisfy her. After a brief pause, he simply tells her to follow him if she is determined to be punished. He leads her to his office, a prestigious space that has been the heart of his noble family for generations. It is a place where only the head of the family is permitted to enter, and no one is allowed to step foot inside without explicit permission. Theorad knows that he is about to break a long-standing tradition, as he will be the first to bring a slave into this sacred room. Additionally, he notices that the elf is now without her clothes, something she has done of her own accord. He had never instructed her to undress, only telling her he would punish her, a statement that seemed to trigger her decision to strip. As he walks with her into the office, Theorad ponders whether this is truly the best course of action. He had brought her here before to collect the necessary materials, but now he wonders if it is right to engage in such a dirty act within the walls of a noble office. Yet, he cannot bring himself to turn back. He realizes that if he sends her away now, he will essentially be condemning himself to an irreversible path. With a deep, inward apology to his father and ancestors for what he is about to do, Theorad steels himself. He then addresses the elf, telling her that he will begin the torturous process he had previously promised. He understands now, more clearly than ever, that in order to survive and escape this complex web of desires and obligations, he must violate the elf. Lord Theorad is fully aware that the elf knows everything but continues to act as though she is oblivious, a fact that both perplexes and infuriates him. It drives him mad, knowing that she is playing some kind of game with him, feigning innocence despite understanding everything that is happening. Yet, he chooses to play along, deciding to indulge her request for punishment. He claims that he will indeed punish her as she desires, asking if she is getting scared. Her response, a firm no, only deepens his frustration. He then coldly orders her to be quiet and simply listen to him. Theorad feels an intense internal struggle as he turns his back on her. It's becoming increasingly difficult to maintain the cold, indifferent mask he's been wearing, and he senses his control slipping. He continues speaking in a harsh tone, reminding her that he had already admonished her the previous night, yet she still hasn't learned her lesson. He tells her that this is the reason he came up with the idea of a letter, because he realized that words alone no longer hold any weight with her. She simply doesn't listen to what he says, so he decides that actions, particularly those she cannot ignore, are necessary. His voice grows colder as he explains that he plans to write a letter, but not on paper, as she might expect. He watches her closely for any sign of displeasure, knowing that if she reacts unfavorably, he can change his approach. He continues to berate her, claiming that he will take actions she won't soon forget, and that the letter he will write will be on her body itself. He orders her to consider it an honor, as she will be marked with his handwriting on her stupid body. With those words, Theorad turns to face her, his eyes searching her expression as he waits for her reaction. To his satisfaction, the elf begins to sob, claiming that what he's suggesting is too harsh. Inwardly, Lord Theorad knows that his plan is working perfectly. He maintains his cold, detached expression, not allowing a flicker of emotion to betray him. Calmly, he responds that he is the one who decides what is too harsh, not her, and orders her to stop whining. He then tells her to place the objects she is holding onto the desk, a command she obeys without hesitation. As he watches her comply, Lord Theorad mentally assesses the scene before him. The sealing wax is prepared, as are the quill and ink. He now knows that everything is in place for what he plans to do next. His mind momentarily lingers on the details, as he orders the elf to climb onto the desk and lie down. She hesitates, but he doesn't allow her any time to think. With a cold, firm command, he tells her to lie down, and she obediently follows. She exposes her bare form as she does so, and despite his attempt to maintain his composure, the air is thick with tension as he scoops up the hot wax. His voice low and commanding as he asks her if she is shy. She responds, albeit hesitantly, that she is a little. He smirks inwardly, knowing this is the moment he's been waiting for. He assures her that he will fix her shyness, explaining that he will clothe her, not in fabric, but in the hot wax. He orders her to remove her hands from covering her chest, and after a moment of hesitation, she does as instructed. Despite his outward composure, Lord Theorad cannot help but think, as he gazes down at her, that her figure, while natural, is not what matters in this moment. Continuing his grim task, Lord Theorad proceeded to pour the hot wax onto her chest, eliciting a sharp scream of pain from the woman. Yet a perverse observation struck him. She seemed to favor the application of sealing wax over the dripping candle wax, a detail that oddly troubled him as the scent of what he imagined to be burning flesh had been particularly offensive. He then picked up the quill, a cruel smile playing on his lips as he mused that her current state was the most fitting attire for one as unworthy of proper garments, noting her apparent compliance which confirmed the efficacy of his scheme, his immediate intention being to inscribe a suitable message upon her belly before the final act of pouring more sealing wax and imprinting it with the family seal. The pivotal moment of the entire torment, he mused, rested upon the inscription, a detail he knew the returning elf would scrutinize with particular interest as the culmination of the defilement, thus necessitating something far beyond a commonplace sentence to satisfy such a perverse expectation. A flicker of frustration crossed his mind as he struggled to devise an adequately vulgar and offensive phrase. His limited experience with women, confined solely to Ashley, proving unhelpful in this dark endeavor, though a distant memory of a bizarre hobgoblin tale, a book that had once provoked childhood revulsion, offered a potential, albeit unpleasant, resource. Mentally sifting through the book's lurid contents, he discarded phrase after phrase, a surge of annoyance rising at his father's inexplicable acquisition of a limited hardcover edition of such repulsive material. The elf's unwavering gaze now fixed upon him spurred him to action, and he resolved to weave 3 of the more repellent phrases into a single sentence, beginning to scratch the words onto her lower stomach, instructing her to remain still, regarding her body as mere parchment. A sudden sneeze interrupted his concentration, a momentary concern that the dust in the unventilated room might be to blame flitting through his thoughts, a feeling that he had slightly disrupted the intended atmosphere, briefly unsettling him, though he quickly dismissed it, assuming such a minor interruption would be overlooked. However, his focus shattered as he noticed the quill had broken the skin, a bead of blood welling up and tracing a crimson line, causing an inward surge of panic within Lord Theorad as he registered the woman's now distinctly grim expression. So, after carefully considering the situation, he made the decision not to even attempt to deny his mistake. Instead, he acted as though he had meant to do it all along, as though it was part of his plan from the very beginning. With a sharp, almost irritated tone, he remarked that it was truly annoying that he had told her to hold her breath, adding sarcastically that she must think his writing was foolish. In this moment, he was deliberately crafting a new narrative, one that would erase the possibility that he had accidentally stabbed her with a quill while sneezing. Instead, he wanted her to believe that the injury was not a mistake at all but a deliberate act, one born out of annoyance at her very breathing. To test if his manipulation had worked, he snapped at her, demanding an answer. The elf slave, her voice tremulous, apologized, admitting that it was painful for her to hold her breath. Internally, Lord Theorad felt a sense of relief, though his expression remained cold and distant. He was pleased that his ploy had succeeded, but he refused to show any weakness or emotion. He coldly continued to berate her, emphasizing that she was nothing more than a lowly tool, and yet, incredibly, she was still concerned about her own pain. With his condescending tone, he continued to belittle her, making it clear that she should know her place. The elf slave, her voice barely above a whisper, apologized again, calling herself a stupid slave. Lord Theorad, though still maintaining his cold demeanor, couldn't help but remark that it was somewhat admirable that she knew her position, her place in the hierarchy. But he added with a sneer that it wasn't enough. He couldn't tolerate her repeatedly making mistakes, and he warned her in a chilling tone that if she ever dared to get on his nerves again, she would be disposed of without hesitation. His voice turned sharp and commanding as he ordered her to hold her breath once more, continuing with his writing as though she were no more than an insignificant presence in the room. He told her that if she inhaled or exhaled, if she dared to make the slightest sound or movement, thinking it was painful to hold her breath, she would face an even harsher punishment. The threat hung in the air, though in truth, he had not yet thought of what that punishment would be. He simply wanted to impose fear and discomfort upon her, to maintain control over her fragile state. He wrote quickly, almost dismissively, trying to keep his writing short in order to avoid prolonging her suffering. Eventually, after a period of tense silence, he completed the letter, a single epistle. With a curt motion, he finally permitted her to breathe. The elf slave, gasping for air, immediately began panting heavily, her chest rising and falling with the effort. Lord Theorad, having completed his writing, reached for a liquid seal with practiced ease. As he held the heated substance in his hand, he casually remarked that now that he was finished, it was time to seal the letter with his family's mark. The liquid shimmered dangerously as he moved to apply it, and the elf slave, still standing in a submission that bordered on exhaustion, winced at the sight. With a voice strained by discomfort, she protested, claiming that the liquid was too hot and that it would burn her body. But Lord Theorad showed no sign of concern. His cold, detached gaze never leaving the seal, he calmly replied, "It's your body, not mine." As if it were of no consequence, the elf slave, her nerves fraying under his indifference, hesitated for a brief moment before reaching out and grabbing his hand. Her gesture an unspoken plea, not just for relief, but perhaps a sign that she wanted him to continue, despite the pain. Lord Theorad, fully aware of her silent communication, didn't stop her. Instead, with a voice laced with ice, he commanded her to let go, his words a cold dismissal. But before she could release her grip, he poured the scalding liquid onto her exposed skin. Her reaction was immediate and visceral. She screamed, her body jerking in pain as the heat of the liquid seared into her flesh. With an almost clinical detachment, Lord Theorad stamped the seal onto her skin, the imprint leaving a vivid mark as the elf slave writhed beneath the agony. She continued to experience spasms of pain as the seal settled into her skin, but Lord Theorad showed no sign of empathy. His expression remained unchanged, his task now complete. "Enough," he said coldly, his voice devoid of any warmth. "This should suffice as your punishment. I have no further business with you." He turned away, dismissing her with a flick of his hand, ordering her to crawl back to her room and read the letter he had written, as if she were nothing more than a tool to carry out his commands. As the elf slave slowly began to move, Lord Theorad sensed her eyes on him, a brief moment of hesitation in her steps. He knew, in that moment, that she might turn to look at him, so he made sure to wipe his hand with deliberate care, as though the mere touch of a dirty slave disgusted him. The action was swift and calculated, as if he wanted to rid himself of any trace of the encounter. When she was far enough away, he finally allowed himself to breathe in relief. The momentary discomfort had passed, and his thoughts shifted. He couldn't shake the sense that this elf slave was not the one he had envisioned. A fleeting thought he quickly decided to brush aside. His mind wandered briefly to the memory of other elves, ones who had come from different lands, who had caught the eyes of kings and princes. One such elf had, apparently, been so stunning that she had knocked a king down with her beauty. The elf had gone to see him out of curiosity, but the king had instantly proposed, swept away by her allure. Many men, eager and desperate, had fallen over themselves to win her favor, disguising their true, cunning nature beneath the facade of innocence. But even with these thoughts lingering at the edge of his mind, the elf slave's image remained in his thoughts. As she limped away, her body still trembling from the pain, she couldn't help but think of Lord Theorad's earlier expression. Something in his eyes, something about the way he looked at her, had sparked an unsettling question in her mind. Did he not see her as a woman at all? She was, after all, a creature of beauty, admired in every land she had traveled to. No one had ever dismissed her like he had. Staring at her reflection in the mirror, she was almost stunned by the beauty that gazed back at her. No one, she was sure, could surpass her in grace and elegance. She couldn't understand how Lord Theorad couldn't see her as a woman. Her mind twisted the situation, convincing her that perhaps it wasn't that he didn't recognize her as a woman, but rather he was simply suppressing it, suppressing his attraction out of fear. He wouldn't be able to resist forever. The elf slave stands alone in her room, using magic to cleanse the burns left by the hot liquid seal. The cool, soothing magic flows over her skin, washing away the remnants of Lord Theorad's cruel treatment. But her mind races, full of dark, dangerous thoughts. She feels a burning urge to end Lord Theorad's life on the spot if he dares to come near her again. Yet, as she thinks about it, a twisted part of her finds a strange satisfaction in imagining what it would be like to watch him lose control, to see him scramble and struggle, trying to force himself on her. The thought sends a dangerous thrill through her. The power dynamics between them shift in her mind, and she can't help but imagine how much fun it would be to see him helpless in that moment. But despite the allure of that thought, she wonders if she could actually go through with it. The idea lingers in her mind, but it's tempered by the enjoyment she feels in imagining his discomfort. What she doesn't know is that Lord Theorad is watching her. His gaze is cold and calculating as he observes her through the surveillance system, his presence felt despite the distance. He watches her closely, noting the faint, satisfied expression on her face as she uses her magic. His mind turns, wondering what she truly meant when she said, "Not too bad." Was she implying she didn't mind the blood? Or did she enjoy the torture? His thoughts linger on this, a flicker of unease stirring in his chest. But despite his concerns, he is relieved. At least for now, he is alive. For now, he still holds control. The following day, a female mage is observed soaring gracefully through the air atop her flying broom, eventually descending to the ground with remarkable precision. Lord Theorad stands nearby, watching her landing with a quiet sense of curiosity. As the mage touches down, she offers a polite greeting and confirms his identity, asking if he is Lord Theorad of the Deharim family. Lord Theorad responds, still processing the situation, and inquires whether she knows him. She explains that she is the bearer of a letter addressed to him, a letter that must be delivered with care and urgency. It dawns on Lord Theorad that the letter has arrived by way of a witch's special one-day delivery service, which only adds to the mystery. The mage hands over the letter, and Lord Theorad takes it, offering his thanks. Upon closer inspection, he notices the seal on the letter, the unmistakable insignia of the Pelagoroin family. He briefly considers the possibility that the letter might be a reprimand from the Count, perhaps a letter of disappointment regarding his behavior, particularly in light of what Ashley had said. As he opens the letter, he begins reading, and the message becomes clear. Ashley's brother has expressed concern about her recent change in demeanor. He notes that Ashley has always been cheerful after meeting with Lord Theorad, but recently she has seemed troubled and preoccupied. Her brother wonders if something might have occurred between the two of them, offering his help if necessary, and encourages Lord Theorad to reach out if there is anything he can do to assist. Realizing that the letter is not from the Count himself, Lord Theorad surmises that Ashley must have kept her concerns to herself, not revealing anything about their interactions. He turns to the witch, asking if the delivery service only operates until the moon rises. The witch affirms that this is indeed the case, adding that even the Emperor has no power to alter the terms of the arrangement established between humans and witches on Walpurgis night. Lord Theorad then requests a brief moment to compose a response, explaining that he needs to write to both Lord Fred and Ashley. The witch observes him with a knowing glance, remarking that it seems something serious is at play. She admits that she does not wish to meddle in personal matters, but based on her observations from above, she suggests that no response is truly needed. At that moment, a male subordinate rushes toward Lord Theorad, breathless with urgency. He announces that Lady Ashley has just arrived. Ashley is seen within the confines of the mansion, her presence calm and composed, yet there is a noticeable air of contemplation. Across from her, the elf sits hesitantly, her posture stiff and her expression unsure, as if caught in a moment of internal conflict. The silence stretches between them, thick with unspoken thoughts, until finally, Ashley breaks it with a gentle smile, offering a quiet reassurance. She tells the elf to feel at ease, inviting her to help herself, gently reminding her that it was she who had asked the elf to join her at the table, making it clear that there was no need for the elf to be concerned about the presence of the other servants. Despite this kind invitation, the elf, still unsure, hesitates, voicing her concern that she is certain her master, Lord Theorad, would disapprove of such familiarity. Ashley, ever patient, reassures her once more, insisting that Lord Theorad would never be bothered by something so trivial. Yet, the elf's face hardens slightly as she responds with a quiet but pointed remark, stating that Ashley does not truly understand her master. She reveals that Lord Theorad had once reprimanded her for something as insignificant as breaking a plate. Ashley, taken aback by this revelation, is momentarily stunned. The elf, seemingly emboldened by Ashley's shocked reaction, continues, her voice colder now as she recounts how Lord Theorad had even gone so far as to tell her it was her fault for being born beautiful. She speaks of how he had harassed her, a chilling statement that seems to contradict everything Ashley believes about the Lord she has come to know. Ashley, feeling a growing sense of unease, cannot reconcile this image of Lord Theorad with the one she holds in her heart. Her mind races with confusion, wondering if perhaps the elf is lying to her, fabricating these dark tales. The more she hears, the more doubts seep into her mind. In an attempt to clarify the situation, Ashley decides to engage the elf in deeper conversation, which is precisely why she had dismissed the other servants earlier, to create a space for truth to unfold. She resolves to listen, to understand, and to draw out more of the elf's perspective, even if it feels uncomfortable. Ashley, ever the diplomat, plays along with the elf's narrative and suggests, with a slight tilt of her head, that Lord Theorad must be a terrible person. The elf, surprisingly, agrees with her, but her reasoning only deepens the mystery. She claims to understand why Lord Theorad behaves as he does, explaining that it is natural for a man to act possessively toward a beautiful woman under his gaze. Ashley listens, her mind struggling to process this justification. But she finds herself vehemently disagreeing with the elf's view. In a calm yet firm tone, she counters, insisting that what truly matters is a person's character, their inner qualities, rather than their outward appearance. To illustrate her point, Ashley uses an analogy, telling the elf that drinking water from a silver cup is far better than drinking poison from a golden one. At her words, the elf's expression grows cold, and she regards Ashley with a mixture of surprise and something else, perhaps skepticism, before offering a begrudging compliment, remarking that Ashley is indeed very wise. There is a moment of silence between them, a subtle tension building in the air, before the elf shifts the conversation again, asking Ashley a question that catches her off guard. The elf, her voice lower now, inquires whether Ashley has ever been intimate with her master. The question hangs in the air, making Ashley flinch, her mind racing to process the unexpected turn the conversation has taken. The elf, seemingly unaware of the shock her question has caused, continues, stating that she has heard Ashley has known Lord Theorad for a long time and is even engaged to him. Realizing the delicacy of her inquiry, the elf quickly apologizes for the rudeness of the question. Ashley finds herself puzzled by the elf's persistent and somewhat intrusive questions. She wonders what could possibly motivate the elf to ask such a personal and pointed inquiry, her mind racing to understand the underlying intentions behind them. After a moment of contemplation, Ashley answers calmly, telling the elf that she and Lord Theorad have never shared an intimate relationship. The elf, however, seems unmoved, almost pressing for more of an explanation. She remarks with a hint of skepticism, asking why not, especially considering how long Ashley and Lord Theorad have known each other. She implies that their lack of physical closeness might suggest that they aren't truly in love with each other. The elf's continued probing pokes at Ashley's patience, and without thinking, Ashley stands up abruptly. The elf, with a slight smirk, observes the sudden movement and quips that it seems Ashley and her master have never seen each other naked, which, in her view, means their love might not be as profound as Ashley might think, if it can even be called love. The words sting, but Ashley takes a deep breath, collecting herself before responding. She lowers herself back into her seat, her posture steady and calm. She questions the elf, asking if, by her reasoning, love can only be considered real if it involves intimacy. She challenges the idea that love is simply completed by the act of physical pleasure, countering that if that were the case, then how many men would a prostitute in a brothel truly love? To Ashley, real love is not something driven by instinct or desire, but something rooted in reason and understanding. As she continues, Ashley reflects on how people might mistakenly believe they love each other through the act of physical pleasure, especially in the heat of the moment. She suggests that this belief could be a profound mistake. The elf's eyes narrow, her cold glare fixating on Ashley as she listens intently, clearly disapproving of Ashley's perspective. Undeterred, Ashley presses on, pointing out that she has heard how prostitutes often hear declarations of love from countless men in a single day. She then directly challenges the elf, asking if she believes love expressed in such a fleeting and transactional way can truly be called real love. The elf, clearly irritated by Ashley's words, feels a surge of annoyance. The thought of silencing Ashley crosses her mind, and she briefly contemplates whether she should simply end the conversation and eliminate Ashley altogether. However, a fleeting moment of hesitation keeps her from acting on this impulse. She is unsure if Lord Theorad would be able to keep the promise he made to her, and for now, she decides that she cannot risk ending Ashley's life just yet. Instead, she forces a smile, masking her frustration. With a cold tone, she tells Ashley that she is very smart, expressing her admiration for how well Ashley speaks. Ashley, sensing the underlying tension but maintaining her composure, smiles back. She responds in kind, mentioning that she too had thought they would make good friends. However, deep down, she remains cautious, fully aware that the elf has been speaking ill of Lord Theorad in subtle ways, almost as if trying to sow doubt in Ashley's mind or undermine her connection with him. Ashley's intuition tells her that the elf is hiding something. The air in the room is thick with tension as Lord Theorad walks in, sensing something is amiss. The normally serene atmosphere is now weighed down with unease. He wonders what has caused the sudden change as his eyes flick from Ashley to the elf, the latter sitting quietly but exuding an unmistakable aura of hostility. Approaching Ashley, he greets her with a calm inquiry, asking what has brought her to his presence today. Ashley, however, cuts to the chase. She states that there is something she must say, requesting that all the unconcerned people be excused from the room. Lord Theorad, ever dutiful, signals for the servants to leave, sending them out with a simple gesture. Once they are alone, Ashley wastes no time, claiming that she has heard from the elf that Lord Theorad had tortured her for breaking a few plates. Lord Theorad's gaze flickers to the elf, who now sits with a self-assured air. His mind races, wondering what she has said to Ashley. The idea of a false narrative taking shape irks him, but he remains composed. Ashley confronts him sharply, her voice filled with disdain as she accuses him of humiliating the innocent elf, making her suffer for a mere mistake, which, in Ashley's view, is no different than accusing a random thug of the same. The words hit Lord Theorad like a physical blow, and as he pauses, struggling to come up with a response, Ashley does something unexpected. She subtly moves her lips, almost as if urging him to act, and to his surprise, it becomes clear that she wants him to slap her cheek. For a moment, Lord Theorad hesitates, wondering if he has misread her lips, unsure if he's seeing things correctly. Ashley, not one to let the moment pass, presses on, signaling with her hand, impatient for his response. Reluctantly, Lord Theorad makes the decision to follow her unspoken demand, striking her cheek lightly, just as she seemingly wished. The impact sends her stumbling backward onto the couch, her head tilting slightly as she catches herself. For a moment, Lord Theorad stands frozen, unsure if what just happened was truly the right course of action. He watches Ashley, the scene unfolding before him, leaving him both confused and uncertain about her intentions. Ashley, however, quickly turns the situation in her favor. With a sudden shift in demeanor, she feigns vulnerability, her eyes glistening with what appears to be unshed tears. Her voice trembles, but there's a hard edge to her words as she tells Lord Theorad that she cannot simply let this injustice slide. She threatens him with legal action, claiming she will take him to court and prosecute him for his sins. Her guards, who have been silently observing, step forward at her command, their presence imposing and firm. Lord Theorad is taken aback, stunned by the sudden escalation. Before he can respond or regain his composure, the guards take him by the arms and escort him out of the mansion. As they step into the courtyard, Ashley commands him to enter the carriage, which waits for them at the entrance. Without hesitation, she follows him inside, her gaze not leaving him for a moment. Outside, the elf stands still, her eyes dark with an intense, almost violent aura emanating from her. There's no mistaking the cold, dangerous look on her face. Lord Theorad, despite being in the midst of a confusing and heated moment, can't help but notice the direction of the elf's gaze. It isn't directed at him. Instead, her piercing eyes are fixed firmly on Ashley. As the carriage continued its journey, the air between Lord Theorad and Ashley remained thick with unspoken tension, their thoughts blending with the rhythm of the ride. Ashley, with quiet confidence, finally broke the silence, revealing that she had already spoken to the reporters. She explained that she had apologized for the scene they had caused, though she made it clear that this was the only way to avoid raising the elf's suspicion. Taking a calculated step, she further mentioned that under normal circumstances, it would be impossible to bring a peasant to trial, and that this course of action had been the only practical one. Ashley then shifted her gaze toward Lord Theorad, her expression sharp, as she revealed her thoughts on the elf. She suspected the elf's claim of being 25 was false, recognizing the elf's apparent manipulation and questioning the veracity of the information she had received. Ashley continued, subtly pointing out that Lord Theorad had likely been trying to avoid the constant surveillance of the elf, a theory he did not deny, confirming her suspicions. He admitted that he hadn't realized there was anyone who could see through his facade and understand the deeper motivations behind his actions, a truth that seemed to surprise him. Without warning, his hand gently cupped Ashley's face, his touch soft but filled with admiration, as he acknowledged her beauty. It was a rare moment of vulnerability for him, though his thoughts quickly returned to the matter at hand. He reflected on his past actions, which, despite being part of a larger plan, had still caused her harm. He felt a deep desire to atone, to make amends, and so he sought to understand her wishes, wanting to resolve the debt he felt he owed her. Ashley, her hand resting on his, expressed a simple but powerful request. She wanted him to stay with her a little longer, her grip firm and her gaze unwavering. In that quiet moment, Lord Theorad struggled to understand how such a small request could hold so much meaning. His mind grappled with the idea that this could be enough to satisfy her, but Ashley, with a calm demeanor, conveyed that his presence was more valuable to her than anything else, making it clear that it was a request filled with deep personal significance. Their arrival at the courthouse brought a shift in the atmosphere. The steward, standing at the ready, offered to carry their luggage, but Ashley swiftly declined, explaining that they had no baggage to carry and requesting he wait nearby. He complied without question, his demeanor professional as he stepped aside. Together, Lord Theorad and Ashley entered the courthouse, where the chief servants approached to greet them, with one male servant introducing himself as Noman, Ashley's personal servant. Lord Theorad's eyes flickered over Noman's attire, noting its refinement. Ashley, anticipating his thoughts, explained that she had prepared the clothing for him to wear, deeming it a necessary measure. Lord Theorad nodded, understanding the practicality of the situation, recognizing Ashley's attention to detail and her thorough planning. She instructed him to meet her at the back gate after he changed, with Noman guiding him there. As he processed the events, Lord Theorad couldn't help but reflect on Ashley's meticulous preparations. He felt a sense of humility, realizing how much she had done for him, especially when he had been unable to return the favor. He then smiles at her that he will go get changed. Lord Theorad stood awkwardly in the new attire, the fabric unfamiliar and slightly uncomfortable against his skin. As Noman observed him with an approving gaze, he couldn't help but offer a compliment, telling Lord Theorad that he looked great, even going so far as to say that he, as a man, felt charmed by the noble's appearance. Lord Theorad, however, was not one to fall for such pleasantries. He dismissed Noman's words with a cold response, stating that there was no need for pretense. Noman insisted that his words were sincere, but Lord Theorad wasn't convinced. He pointed out that, as a servant to a noble, Noman's sincerity was difficult to believe, adding that from any angle, he appeared ordinary, nothing special. Anyone passing by would surely think the same. Meanwhile, Ashley had changed into a pink attire, the soft fabric flowing elegantly around her. She looked at Lord Theorad, asking him for his opinion. When he saw her, his face flushed with surprise and admiration. The pink dress was sensual and tempting, far more than he had expected, and he couldn't help but think that he would dislike anyone else seeing her in it. His reaction was genuine, but Ashley, with a playful smirk, teasingly offered to change into something else if he was uncomfortable. Before he could respond, his attention was drawn to the signals from both Noman and the maid, who subtly indicated that he should not agree with Ashley's suggestion. Lord Theorad, now aware of the situation, quickly amended his words. He explained that to say he was uncomfortable would be a disservice to her beauty, so there was no need for her to change. His words, though kind, carried an underlying sincerity that made Ashley blush. The servants, witnessing this exchange, exchanged knowing glances and gave Lord Theorad an excited thumbs up, making him feel both embarrassed and amused. Ashley, clearly pleased by his response, told him that she had something for him to wear before they left. The maid then approached with two small hair accessories that resembled cat ears, a costume-like design. Ashley explained that these accessories were inscribed with magic, something she had intended to acquire for their disguise, but hadn't had the time to properly find the right items. These were the best she could obtain in her hurry. Lord Theorad raised an eyebrow, leaning in slightly to whisper his concern. He asked, even with the magic inscriptions, if she was sure that the elf wouldn't be able to detect them. Ashley whispered back, her voice just as soft, reassuring him that the magical inscriptions would greatly reduce the chances of being detected. They would be difficult for the elf to sense, especially considering their use for disguise. She explained that the magic would create a basic concealment effect, allowing them to go unnoticed. Additionally, since they entered the courthouse through the front gate but would leave through the back, the elf would assume they were still inside, thinking nothing amiss. Ashley's words were clear and precise, making it evident that she had thought through every detail. She continued, explaining that as long as the elf remained a servant and wasn't willing to abandon her pretense, she wouldn't be able to enter the courthouse. She handed the accessories to Lord Theorad. Lord Theorad examined the magical cat ear accessory with a skeptical eye before placing it on his head. He looked to Ashley for her reaction, asking her opinion on how it suited him. Ashley nearly laughed but managed to compose herself, commenting that it didn't quite match his hair color, though it was undeniably cute. Lord Theorad felt a strange discomfort being called cute, especially since he was the heir to the prestigious de Harem family. Noticing his unease, Ashley quickly corrected herself, saying he looked very dashing, though she glanced away shyly, seemingly embarrassed. Lord Theorad, leaning in slightly, teased her, suggesting that if anyone were cute, it was her. His words made Ashley blush, momentarily losing herself in her thoughts as her heart raced from the compliment. They arrived at a luxurious restaurant, and as Lord Theorad perused the menu, Ashley found herself fumbling with her own. She seemed distracted, still lost in the moment with his teasing. Lord Theorad, noticing her struggle, took charge and made the order himself. The attendant noted down the request, confirming that their food would be ready shortly. Lord Theorad remarked, surprised at how well the magical item worked, noting that the attendant was serving him as if the cat ears weren't even there. Ashley, clearly pleased, smirked with pride and claimed that it was a unique item she had personally bought. Its versatility made it a popular choice, and it had been used by many customers for various purposes. As the conversation shifted, Ashley became more serious and asked Lord Theorad about the elf. She was curious about her age and why she was acting as though she were a servant. Lord Theorad answered with certainty, explaining that the elf was around 250 years old and had magical abilities that could rival an archwizard's. When Ashley inquired further about why the elf was acting like a servant, he shrugged and nonchalantly suggested that she might just be a pervert, not knowing anything more specific. Ashley, however, wasn't convinced. She pointed out that the elf wasn't a typical one, mentioning her hesitation when asked for her name, her discomfort, and the hostile glare she had given Ashley earlier. Lord Theorad, sensing the weight of her observations, asked what she was implying. Ashley explained that she felt the elf had been sold to him for a reason, that there had to be some deeper motive behind her presence. Lord Theorad dismissed the idea, stating there was no way to discover the elf's true identity. He was certain it would remain a mystery. Ashley agreed but expressed her determination to investigate on her own. She acknowledged that the industry was full of veils, making it difficult to uncover the truth, but she believed it was still worth pursuing. Lord Theorad, although still unsure, appreciated her resolve, thanking her for her efforts. Lord Theorad sat at the table, his mind preoccupied with the events earlier. He couldn't help but think back to how the elf had glared at him when he boarded the carriage. The intensity of her anger left him uneasy, and he couldn't shake the feeling that there would be consequences. He wondered if, after all this time, he would once again face some form of heavy punishment at her hands. His thoughts were interrupted as he realized his worry was evident on his face, a fact that Ashley, sitting beside him, quickly noticed. With a soft smile, Ashley pulled out a small vial containing a blue potion. She claimed it was a surprise for him, something to help with his physical health, as she had heard of his recent troubles and wanted to ease his burden. She mentioned that it was a high-quality supplement, one she had bought at an expensive price, urging him to drink it before eating for the best effect. Lord Theorad raised an eyebrow, slightly skeptical but trusting her, and took the potion. The bitter taste hit his tongue immediately, causing him to grimace. He remarked, almost sarcastically, about how medicine that's good for you always seems to taste terrible. Ashley chuckled at his reaction, her eyes twinkling with amusement as she reassured him that such potions were always bitter but effective. She excused herself from the table, claiming she needed to use the restroom. Once inside, Ashley quickly rummaged through her bag, hoping to ensure she had everything she needed for their continued outing. But when she reached for another vial, her heart skipped a beat. It was another potion, identical in appearance to the one she had just given to Lord Theorad. Ashley's mind raced as she recalled the moment she had purchased the supplements. She remembered the shopkeeper's hurried manner and the odd, slightly sinister nature of the second potion, one that she had dismissed as simply a supplement. However, upon closer inspection, she realized that it wasn't just any regular health potion. This one had a much darker purpose, one that could unleash the inner evils within a person, drawing out their worst tendencies and desires. Her stomach twisted in anxiety. Had she given him the wrong one by mistake? The thought of accidentally poisoning Lord Theorad with something so dangerous sent a chill through her. She quickly closed her bag, trying to compose herself, but the weight of her mistake pressed heavily on her mind. Meanwhile, back at the table, Lord Theorad continued to sit quietly, unaware of the trouble brewing. Ashley quickly hurried back to the dining area, her mind racing with worry about the potion she had accidentally given Lord Theorad. She was still trying to piece together whether the mix-up could have any dangerous consequences. She had feared that, if the potion's effects went unnoticed for too long, it could lead to a situation where Lord Theorad's true identity was exposed to someone who would recognize him, causing rumors to spread fast. That would be disastrous, especially with the sensitive nature of his position. Upon her return, she was greeted with a scene that made her pause. Lord Theorad was arguing with a service worker, his tone uncharacteristically harsh. He was complaining about a strand of hair in his food, something that would normally be a minor issue. The service worker, flustered and apologizing repeatedly, attempted to offer compensation, but Lord Theorad wasn't backing down. He continued berating her, almost as though he was intentionally trying to embarrass the staff. He even went so far as to threaten to label the head chef an idiot if it happened again. His voice was sharp and dismissive, his attitude not at all like the composed and dignified man she was used to. Ashley watched the exchange with a sinking feeling in her stomach. His behavior was unsettling. He had always been a man of grace, even in moments of frustration. This was different. It wasn't just a change in tone. It felt like something had shifted within him, and she wondered if the medicine was the cause. Could it be that the potion really was working, but not in the way she had hoped? As Lord Theorad noticed her, he gestured for her to sit down. He was already in the process of scolding the service worker further, but when his eyes met hers, he softened his tone just enough to ask her to join him at the table, implying she shouldn't stand there awkwardly and disturb the staff. Ashley hesitated, taking her seat beside him. There was a strange, almost detached kindness in his voice, but it felt off, like something was out of place. As she sat down, she couldn't help but think how differently Lord Theorad was acting now. She had expected him to perhaps become a bit temperamental or irritable, but this was far beyond that. He seemed to have shifted into a completely different persona, rude and dismissive, which only confirmed that the medicine had indeed started to take effect. It was disturbing to witness the transformation so abruptly. Her thoughts were interrupted when Lord Theorad snapped at her, his words sharp and cutting. He demanded to know if she was there to eat or simply sit there blankly. He said she looked like a fool just staring at him. Ashley blinked in surprise, momentarily thrown off by his sudden hostility. She could only reason to herself that the medicine was working more powerfully than she had anticipated. The rudeness, the temper, everything seemed to fall into place as a result of that strange potion. During the meal, Lord Theorad unexpectedly pulls out his handkerchief and gently cleans the crumbs from Ashley's mouth, a gesture that surprises her. He remarks that she shouldn't go around with food on her lips, calling it clumsy. Ashley, flustered, offers a quiet apology. His response comes with a touch of sternness as he tells her she should be apologizing, then follows it up by stating that she is, in fact, not just the youngest daughter of Count Leoberg or a member of the House Felgeroin, but rather his fiancée, which places her in a position of leadership alongside him in the de Harem family. He further asserts that, in truth, she is simply his woman, which causes Ashley to blush fiercely, her cheeks flushing with an intensity that betrays her surprise and embarrassment. Lord Theorad then emphasizes the importance of maintaining her dignity at all times, not just as the daughter of Count Leoberg, but as the future wife of a man who holds a significant reputation. He tells her that while the dignity of her family is essential, she must also consider his reputation, for it will be her responsibility as his wife to uphold it. Ashley, still flushed and overwhelmed by his words, remains silent for a moment. She had not expected him to be so assertive, but she finds herself unexpectedly moved by his concern for her, especially since the prospect of marrying him had been her dream for quite some time. Later, the two are seen together in the courtyard where Lord Theorad takes the opportunity to guide Ashley in archery. He stands behind her, adjusting her stance and offering corrections as she aims, instructing her to simply follow his guidance. Throughout their time together, he continues to pay close attention to her, noticing every small detail, even going as far as to tell her that he dislikes seeing her look at other men, a comment that leaves her feeling both flustered and slightly overwhelmed by his possessiveness. In an attempt to distract herself from the tension, Ashley suggests that she go buy ice cream for both of them, offering to go alone. However, Lord Theorad insists on accompanying her, his gaze firm as he says they should go together. At this, Ashley, her patience tested, snaps that she is perfectly fine going by herself, though deep down, she knows that his insistence comes from his desire to keep her close. Later, she is seen standing in a long, winding queue that stretches past the edge of the bustling square, her eyes scanning the crowd with casual interest until they settle on a peculiar figure just ahead. An imposing woman draped in a flowing black gown and matching cape, her presence sharp and unmistakably theatrical amid the mundane. Compelled by curiosity or perhaps a sense of familiarity, she steps forward and taps the woman gently on the shoulder. The witch turns slowly, her expression immediately hardening into one of mock menace as she asserts her identity with grandiosity, declaring herself a terrifying witch and introducing herself as the chief of the Poison Moon Union, an organization whose title, though mystical in tone, essentially translates to the leader of a gang in human terms. Ashley, caught off guard by the lack of recognition, blinks in confusion, her thoughts racing as she tries to understand the dissonance. It takes her a moment to remember the magic inscription still active, the very spell that conceals her identity from familiar eyes. Realization dawning, she promptly dispels the illusion, the subtle shimmer of magic unraveling like mist in the sun. The witch, now able to see her clearly, reacts with visible surprise and a wide grin of recognition. Dreams, the name now associated with the dramatic figure, expresses disbelief at Ashley's presence in such a place, noting her peculiar ensemble of enchanted items and concluding with teasing suspicion that Ashley must be sneaking off on a secret date, deliberately kept from her father's knowledge. She quickly dismisses the idea with a laugh, brushing her own joke aside before shifting to a more genuine concern. With a glimmer of expectation in her eyes, Dreams asks whether Ashley had tried the potion she had provided a few days prior. Ashley nods, her expression tinged with both gratitude and exasperation, explaining that the concoction proved exceptionally effective. So effective, in fact, that its potency had begun to cause more trouble than relief. Dreams, ever theatrical in gesture and tone, tilts her head and asks whether Ashley would like another dose, her voice laced with casual mischief as she produces a small vial from the folds of her gown. She remarks that the potion isn't particularly sought after, so there's still plenty in stock, her fingers absently rolling the glass bottle between them. With a wry smile, she adds that the medicine is not something just anyone can take, unless, of course, they're a pushover like her fiancé. The jab is light, but pointed. Ashley, her expression tightening in quiet defense, responds without hesitation, insisting that Lord Theorad is not a pushover at all. Rather, his kindness is simply mistaken for weakness. Dreams raises an eyebrow, seemingly amused by the sudden spike of emotion, and casually reminds her not to get so worked up. After all, it was only a joke. She then repeats her offer, asking again if Ashley wants more of the potion. Ashley hesitates, her thoughts drifting. The allure is tempting. With another dose, she could see Lord Theorad whenever she wished, just as she managed to do today, and at no cost. The promise of closeness, made possible through magic, hangs in the air like a beckoning whisper. But after a beat, she gently shakes her head, declining the offer. With a quiet resolve, she explains that her feelings aren't for the illusion or the convenient closeness the potion affords, but for the real Theorad, the one who remains himself, unchanged and sincere, without the influence of magic. Dreams, watching from a distance with veiled amusement, can't help but form the impression that Ashley is remarkably innocent and pure-hearted, an endearing trait that only makes her want to tease the girl even more. Meanwhile, Ashley is seen returning to where Lord Theorad waits, her steps light and cheerful as she holds 2 ice creams, one in each hand. With a faint pout, she asks why he didn't explore the area a little while she was gone. His answer comes with a calm sincerity, that nothing in the place caught his interest except for her. The moment his words settle between them, Ashley's cheeks flush with color, her gaze flickering away as the meaning sinks in. Not far off, concealed behind the broad trunk of a tree, Dreams peers out with a mischievous grin, watching the exchange unfold with gleeful anticipation. Deciding to lend her own brand of assistance to the unfolding romance, she murmurs a spell under her breath, subtly guiding a small enchantment toward Ashley. Without realizing it, Ashley's hand shifts, and the next moment, a smear of melting ice cream lands squarely on her own chest, staining the fabric of her dress.